this is a really phenomenal little thing to have. And it just slides along. So if you're making a line that's repetitive, it gives you the same angle. We're in perspective, and it's just brilliant. And you can even put your pencil in one of these holes and go like this, and you get a perfectly it's really nice. I mostly just like it because you don't seem to have to pick it up all the time. It just kind of rolls away with you. But you have this in your black pens in your kit with your Prismacolor markers, your gray markers. You have 2 blacks. That's a nice nib to use if you're a little scared of the Sharpie. But you do a little test first. There's my finest line. And here is supposed to be my intermediate line. That's looking pretty good. And here will be my bold line for my outlining. So now I have 3 weights of line, and I can get started. This is a bedroom, so some of your lines are going to have to be done by hand because they're soft furnishings, and this is an upholstered piece. It's soft, so I'm going to have to go that way. But I don't start with this pen, and I don't start with the intermediate pen. I start with the thinnest pen. And on the inside, most of my lines are going to remain thin. So, and when I do something, I go from the bottom to the top sometimes, because that makes it, or I go from the outside in, because that gives you a little bit of a variation on your line. So even with one pen, you can get some variation. Now, I'm going to leave this to dry before, but I am aching. I am just aching to erase the pencil line so I can see what I've done, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wait. Now, this I could be using the set square for, and I probably should be. But some of your lines will be done by hand. Yeah, I should probably be using the set square. Yeah, this one I will, because this is upholstery, so. You have to think about direction as well. Now, most of this will be covered, yes, with the thick pen, but I'm thinking about, I want it to be fading out lighter as it goes this way. So I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to just go from there out. So every time you pick up a marker and use it, think about direction. Where should the emphasis be? Should it be on the back or the front? And you begin to get a feel for it. This is a very skinny pen, which is what we want to start. It's almost like a dry run. You're just getting an idea of what you want these lines to look like before you actually go in and beef them up. And this one, it almost works against you pressing on it, because it's mine anyway, stops working when I press on it. So we've had some practice at what this will look like with drawing it with our pencil and our blue pencil. And now we're getting a little preview when we use our finest pen. And then when we erase all our lines, fingers crossed they will erase, then we'll have an idea of how to, and I've got just a little tiny leg at the back here. Okay, now you have to let that dry. And for shadow, just to keep this easy and simple, I'm just going to put the shadow directly underneath. Now, be careful. Don't put shadow where it ought to be. So this is part of the box, the original box. So I'm just dealing with shadow on the floor. This also could be part of the projection of the shadow. Remember how we go from the light source and we project down? That in-between state here is projection, and that's not part of the shadow. It's only a box on the floor that's the shadow. So let's maybe outline what the shadow is, and then we can go from there. And I'm just going to keep the original box. The simpler this is, the better. That's another thing too. You can cross your corners, and that looks really sharp and professional. It does. So, and the technique that we're using, I don't know if I told you, the line technique we're using is punch line. But look how long it's taking me to do this. It's taking a long time. And it ought to, because this is very careful work. And as I mentioned, you're going to use your thinnest line for your hatching. Just thin like that. And up here as well, I should do, because if that's in shadow, that's in shadow. And this takes a long time. It's not much different. But truly, if you can pick up one of these, boy, this makes the whole job. Now see, I wasn't thinking. I could have been doing both of these at the same time. So I won't continue on, but you get the idea that you would leave that outline. I'm going to try first with my kneaded eraser. You can also put your finger over it and see. That's the other thing. You've got to be really, really careful about not wrinkling your page when you erase. So you have to be gentle with it. I just want to see what I've got so far. Now this is part of outline. And even this, you can go at it slowly. You can start with one line. Now, I wouldn't necessarily color that line in. I would color this line in. Now, I realize that this is new for you, and you're going to be so frustrated because you're going to say to yourself, well, I don't know. Is that an inside or an outside? I have no idea. And you won't. And you won't. But the process is that you're questioning it. You're at a point where you're questioning it. And that's all I ask of you, is that you question it. Should this be a line that would define the silhouette of my piece? Or is it not? Is it a... Now, you've got a question too. Should I use... If I used it there, I should use it here. So this is the first step to managing this kind of thing, is asking the question. Is it or is it not an inside or an outside? And you do your best. Just do your best. Actually, I'm really quite impressed with how things are going. I know it's hard for you to see, but I can see that there is a lot of progress happening with people's work. I can see them growing more confident in their work, and that's good to see. So now that's my 3. Now this is like watching paint dry, so I won't carry on with this too much longer, but I hope you're getting the idea. Oh, now this is an outside, so I can do that with my, and it's, I don't need my set square for this, do I? Because it's, now this may not look the way you want it to look. You may find it unappealing. So now see, but do it anyway. So see, this now would be a medium line because it's something on top of the bench and it needs a like a medium line. Maybe at the front here a little medium line, but maybe at the back I don't do a medium line. And I should do the thicker line at the back. So it is going to be a little frustrating if you're doing it correctly because you're asking the question and you don't, without experience, you don't know the answer. So you just have to try it. But I still really like the idea of doing the whole thing in the light pencil, the light pen first, and then going back and using your darkest pen, and then going back with your intermediate. It just makes logical sense to me because how do you know where you need the intermediate lines until you have the other 2 extremes in? Often with the rendering, that's a good way to go too. Put your 2 extremes in, and then, oh, that's where this comes in handy. This is another thing. If you can get your hands on one of these, so this is what you'll be involved in, is just detailing, and you'd finish up your hatching, of course. And the thing I like about this pen is that it dries fairly quickly on the marker paper. But the Sharpie does too, but, and again, you find these in your box with your gray markers. That's where they are. Now these blue lines might be a little stubborn, but when you take your photograph, if you've got some little remnants, I really doubt whether they'll be picked up in your photograph. Be when you upload it. Sorry, this is tricky. Now, if there's shadow at the front, there's going to be shadow here, and it would be on the drape as well. But I'm not going to put a line here, and I'm not going to put a line there. I'm just going to let this fall down to the floor. Oh, I shouldn't have been doing that. I should use my brush. If you have any kind of brush, even a paintbrush that you're using for something else, you could probably use it to do that. Now look how long that took, and that was one piece, that was one thing. And you can work how you feel best, but there comes the question, do you do one piece at a time? And I would recommend that you do the focus of the room first, and then base your decisions about everything else on how is it making that thing look. So for example, your bed is the focus. So as you move around your drawing and you're making these decisions, then what would make the bed, keep the bed the focus? So if you're contemplating, say, that example of the carpet, if I put that active pattern in, what will that do to the bed? Will it make it look? Would it still be the focus, or would the focus now become the carpet? And we don't want that. Although there are some really beautiful carpets, we don't want that. So that's why you're interpreting your reference, and why that is such an art, to be able to interpret your reference but not slavishly copy it. So that took a long time, and I'm not done. I have to go now and finish my hatching. I just want to show maybe the hatching for the drape, and then we'll move on. So your whole drawing would look like that. And you got to make sure you've got these straight. So on the drape, I would just do it. Try not to make a line at the top, but try to indicate where the top is. So I should go back up now, because the top is a little bit higher. Like that. So you get a feel for it being drapery. And then just let it go, because this kind of turns into the light. But the base of it, the base of this, and the best way to move, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, you'll have to sort that out. But you'll have to move in a direction that's right for you, so that you're not smearing the lines you just put down. And if you're left-handed, you know all about that. So you just move along, filling in your cast shadows, and I should be going up here. I like to leave a little bit of space here, because there's probably a top plane right here, just a little skinny top plane. Okay, so I hope that gives you an idea of that. Now, you'll recall this drawing. We didn't approach it the same way. We did it a little bit differently, because it was a demo and I needed you to understand what I was doing and to be able to see what I was doing. We used all different colored pencils, and we couldn't erase those. So what we did instead was put our marker paper over top and do our line drawing. And as you recall, we used a really thin line. So what you would do with this now, it's in the state that I was here. It was in this state, wasn't it? Where I had the all thin lines, and then now I would go back and put in the outlines darkly, and put in the hatching, and go back and catch some things with my intermediate marker. Things that I want. And I shouldn't be scritching. These should be, and maybe here you could put, but this should be with the thinner pen. But you do the same thing. First thing, with your skinniest pen, you would outline your shadows. And remember, you can cross corners a little bit. And you don't want a thick outline on these, just enough to inform you. So you have 1 week to do all of this inking in, but it's tedious, so I would suggest that you do it in parts. Don't try to do it, well, don't do it the night before. That's really going to be a disaster, because it does take a really long time. Well, you're not doing this one, just remember you're doing the bedroom, but okay, so we've got a few little shadows here. So this would be, so try to imagine that we've just erased all our blue lines, and now we're just outlining. And the question is, should you do a little bit of hatching here? So I would say yes. You can do a little hatching. Remember now, this is on a cone-shaped object, so you want to put your hatching in the direction that the object is going, its shape. I think you could do that, and a little bit over here. And the sofa itself, remember we put that line in to give it a little bit of weight, and you just keep checking your verticals, and you go in a direction such that you're not going to smear it with your hand. And remember, just lightly, we don't want to put it in so darkly. Now this is a rounded corner, so you don't want to put that line in. Just be really careful with that in your bedroom for sure. They look a little bit. And the first ones you put down, they're going to look awkward. Until you get an overall pattern, they'll look really awkward. So don't worry about that, just keep going. You saw in the examples so that looks rounded. And then you can go in and do your base one. Notice that I'm not making any differentiation in the shadows at all. I'm not making it lighter or darker the way we did with the markers, because the expectation is that you'll be putting marker over it. We're not going to, but that's what we're preparing, is a drawing as if you would be putting marker over top of it. Now we can put a little shading in here, and then it rolls forward and it goes a little bit under here, still keeping them all vertical, and we're not making them curved. Remember why? Because this is the most common line in the room. We don't want to make it stand out, it's background, so we're just putting more of the most common repeated line that's in the room. We're just putting more of that. I have a tendency to kind of scritch up first, and that's not good. You get a little bit of a thingy at the top. Try not to do that, so you can see me doing it and know that it's not attractive. So I'm using what is now my lightest pen to do this, and then I would go back with my thickest pen and leave the intermediate pen, leave the intermediate pen for the end. And then right away, I know that my intermediate pen, I want to make this a little bit accentuated. And I'm going to accentuate it there, and maybe this, and maybe that, maybe this. But I don't want to go as thick. I want to emphasize this. I want to see that this overlaps that. I want this arm to come forward, but I don't outline the whole thing, just the part here. So you really have to keep thinking, don't you? The whole time you're doing this, you can't stop thinking. Now this is a little more stiff upholstery here. And while I'm here, I might as well do this. This was unfortunate that our coffee table lined exactly up with our sofa, or mine did. I don't know about yours, but mine did. So here I'm going against the rule. I'm putting my dark line in first. This would be a dark line. That might help too. So I just want to give you a little bit of some of the thinking that you'll be involved in putting this together. It's not a bedroom, but it does bring this drawing to a bit of a close for us. Now, so this drawing is at the stage of all our thin pen. So now we're just going back with our intermediate and our thick pen to fix things up. And I know right away with my intermediate pen I want to emphasize that a little bit. This front corner I want to put a little bit of weight there. And here, this is a feature of this piece, so I want to make sure I begin it with a little bit of emphasis. I don't have to put the whole thing in that way. It'd be more interesting not to. This now, I want to emphasize the top. So I might just come in from here and in from here and let it open up here. And then you could, let's see, this is our 3. And you'll find you have to get really close to your drawing to do this stuff. It means also that you're going to need to take breaks. So I guess the best advice would be to put in your focus of your drawing first, and then balance everything out accordingly. And as you're looking at it, you'll find different things you want to do. I want to emphasize this curve. Because in the end, you've got to decide if you've done enough to make this the focus. Now, I'd continue that all along. A little bit the tufting here. Now our light is here, so there'd be shadow on the far side of the buttons here, and I continue those as well. And see, this describes a curve, so you describe a curve on the other side, and you just continue on that way until you had everything outlined. And you have to keep putting paper underneath it to make sure that it's looking the way you want it to.